Golf Punks, Replicate, Gold Diggers, Pucked, Cattle Call, Robodoc, Transylmania, and The Beach Party at the Threshold of Hell. If most or all of the titles of these various comedies released throughout the late 90s and early 2000s don't really ring a bell, I wouldn't feel too bad about it. Despite starring such luminary leads as Tom Arnold, Ellie Landry, Thomas Ian Nicholas, David Faustino, Will Friedle, and John Bon Jovi, the aforementioned movies were not exactly what one would call high-profile releases, with most premiering straight to video or cable. And yet, for as forgettable and lost to time as these films may be, they do all enjoy a special distinction that technically makes them a small part of comedy history. For they were all released under the banner of one of America's most famous, venerated humor institutions, National Lampoon. That's right, the same brand responsible for such undisputed comedic classics as Animal House and Vacation was also responsible for such less-than classics as 2010's Ratco, The Dictator's Son, starring Efren Ramirez, and 2011's 301, The Legend of Awesomest Maximus, starring Will Sasso. How can this be? And just what does the National Lampoon name mean for a comedy released with it? Well, that's actually kind of complicated. Started in 1969 by Harvard graduates Doug Kenny, Henry Beard, and Robert Hoffman, the National Lampoon magazine was intended to be a national expansion of the Harvard Lampoon, a satirical publication which was a long-running tradition on the Harvard campus, and which all three men had written for. The National Lampoon quickly grew in popularity and critical respect, and throughout the 70s was recognized as the country's most preeminent humor publication. It was a noted outlet for numerous future megastars of comedy writing, including John Hughes, Al Jean, Mike Reiss, P.J. O'Rourke, and Michael O'Donoghue. Meanwhile, a National Lampoon-branded radio and stage show gave rise to stars like John Belushi, Bill Murray, Gilda Radner, Harold Ramis, and Chevy Chase. It's not surprising, then, that the brand eventually segued into cinema. And while not all of their early entries were of equal importance, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who puts 1982's Class Reunion or Movie Madness in the pantheon of comedy classics, the incredible success of 1978's Animal House and 1983's Vacation was enough to cement the National Lampoon label as one with true name-brand value in the movie world. That's certainly what the company J2 Communications was thinking about when, in 1990, they bought the magazine, and, more importantly, the rights to the National Lampoon name, after years of dwindling sales and success for the publication. Mostly known as the company behind Tim Conway's popular Dorf home videos, J2 wasn't necessarily interested in the magazine itself. They would publish an increasingly diminishing number of issues each year, just enough to retain the rights. Where they really saw value was in the cinematic National Lampoon label, but not in writing and producing their own movies. Instead, J2 licensed out the National Lampoon brand name to any comedy film that wanted the extra help to get a little more attention, such as Loaded Weapon 1, Van Wilder, Dorm Days, and Senior Trip. In 2002, the rights to the brand would be sold again, this time to a company which called itself National Lampoon Incorporated. While saying they wanted to move away from the just selling the title approach, and promising they would be more hands-on in the development of new movies, it was still primarily a string of lame teen and college sex comedies that ended up with the name, especially in the wake of the huge success of the American Pie franchise. And so, the once prestigious name brand of National Lampoon slowly but surely lost almost all critical and commercial value. So much so that, by the time Hollywood decided to resurrect one of its true successes in the 2010s, it's doubtful there was even very much consideration about utilizing the label again. The year is 2015, and New Line Cinema is ready to leave behind the National Lampoon branding, but still relaunch a beloved comedic franchise with Vacation. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. Where they might be lampooning, we're definitely buffooning through this farcical month of May.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I don't often like your intros, but I'll give you that one.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is, as you just alluded to, this is the second installment of the already world famous Fairly Franchise event, May the Farce Be With You. Last time we, of course, looked at Mordecai. I'm still recovering from that. And this time we are looking at the 2015 film Vacation. Just Vacation. Single word title, and that is important. Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit about Vacation?
For sure. It is written and directed by John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein. At this point, they had written Horrible Bosses 1 and 2, and they go on to direct Game Night, which I want to talk about later. But then they also go on to write Spider-Man Homecoming, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And
John Francis Daly was already known to people as Sam from Freaks and Geeks as well.
Yes, of course. The budget for this film is $31 million. Domestically, it made $59 million, and worldwide, it made $107 million. So this is actually quite a financial success. It doubled the budget and then some. So why are we talking about it, Trev?
Yeah, no, we'll have to have that discussion. Like, this is one of those interesting cases where you can't say this was a bomb by any means. This was just an undeniable financial hit. Yep. So why was there was never even like any kind of a push to do a sequel to this, as far as I could see. So we will discuss that as we go a little further in. Now, I alluded to earlier the fact that the title is Just Vacation, and as I said, that's pretty important because while this is an intended franchise starter, this was really one of those cases where it was trying to reboot an existing franchise. This is not a singular individual film in as much as this is actually the fifth installment in a long-running comedy franchise, and that is the National Lampoon's Vacation franchise. Or at least I think that's how many people know that franchise, even though National Lampoon is only involved with some of them. But this is a continuation of that. So I thought we could take a little time here at the top and just talk about that as a franchise, Chris, because I think it's also, whenever we do these comedy-based episodes, I think it's important for our listeners to understand our senses of humor as well. Since comedy is so subjective, people should kind of get a sense of what kind of comedies we like, what are we attracted to. Like, for instance, like some of my favorite comedies of all time are like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Airplane, Wet Hot American Summer, Clue, Anchorman. And then you are known as someone who does not like The Princess Bride or Big Trouble in Little China, and you thought Mordecai was okay. So that's where we should set our base levels in terms of how we view comedies, I think.
How long have you? When did you write that? You wrote that a week ago, didn't you?
I've been thinking about it for a bit, but I didn't say anything wrong there. I'm just letting the audience know. But
let's correct a little bit from off the top. We generally have the same sense of humor. Like we like spoof stuff. We like dry stuff. We like witty things. I love my Austin Powers. I love my Ace Ventura. I really like a silly thing. But yes. This franchise in particular, I think, has a lot of that in there. So, we might have a special place for this franchise in our hearts, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. I don't disagree. I will say, though, I think this is a kind of a hard franchise to peg, other than it clearly being a comedy franchise, because I wouldn't say there's one, like, version of comedy that this franchise exists in. Is that a fair thing to say? Like, it's not all farce, even though this is May the Farce Be With You. It's not all family comedy. It's not all raunchy comedy. This franchise really kind of covers, quite a few comedic bases, I think, which is kind of interesting as you go through it. Because, even from like the first film to the fifth and the little individual, installments in between, I don't think there's like a singular tone necessarily, but it's definitely a very well-known franchise, and definitely a franchise I grew up with for sure. Yeah. Being a child of the 80s, these first three films were very, very important to me in terms of just constantly being on cable all the time and revisiting them, and just how big of a comedic star Chevy Chase was in that time as well. Because, of course, I guess I'm assuming most of our listeners know this, but of course the initial version of this franchise is a Chevy Chase franchise. I think that's how most people view it.
Definitely.
What are your thoughts on, before we even just get into Vacation? We'll get there in a second, but I do want to ask, because I don't know if we have an opportunity to dive into this yet in our show, or Chevy Chase thoughts, because he's obviously a complicated figure in the comedy and entertainment world. Where do you kind of fall on just Chevy Chase fandom?
I don't know if I'm like a major, like, I don't think I would call myself a Chevy Chase fan. I don't think I would say that. I respect his physical humor. I think is really, really good. He's really good at dry humor. I think I really loved him on, he was a Weekend Update anchor for a while, right?
Yeah, he was the first one, yeah.
Yes, he was the first one. Again, his dry sense of wit I really like. We're about to rank, the initial franchise here, but I definitely think he's like the shining star of it. Like it really, really works with him. His later career, not a huge fan. He was always the weak point for me in Community. Like from the start, I don't know. He just didn't seem to fit with that group of characters.
I think he would agree.
Yeah, exactly. He obviously seemed like he hated it there, and we know by all accounts he did hate it. But I think he's an actor that will wear his heart on his sleeve at all times. So if he does not like being in the movie or show that he's in, you know it. You know it.
Well, that's one way to put it. I think another way to put it is he's an actor who will always think he's the funniest person on set and think everybody should be listening to his opinions and his way is the right way.
Correct.
And I think that's, and from what we know, it's no secret that Chevy Chase has burned a lot of bridges over the years and is not known as being an easy person to work with. He's not kept a lot of friends. I remember when they did like the roast of Chevy Chase on Comedy Central, and it was actually kind of sad to see how many of the people he'd worked with in the past did not show up for it, and they kind of had to really build that roast off of just a bunch of young comedians who maybe looked up to him but really didn't know him. In fact, I think one of his only co-stars in the past to show up was Beverly D'Angelo, who does seem like has always maintained a good relationship with him, but many others have not. And just if you get into, I read that book years ago about like all behind the scenes stories about Saturday Night Live, and when you read those stories, then you hear other stories about like him on movie sets and stuff. I hate to say it because I do think, obviously, especially in his earlier years, he was clearly very talented. He's very, very funny. As you said, he's a great physical comedian. He has great comedic timing. But he is one of those guys who the stories of him being an asshole are kind of so predominant that it sometimes does color when you watch his stuff, and you kind of go in maybe with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder against him, which is kind of unfair maybe, but
you almost extrapolate right away that he was probably an asshole to his co-stars, like, and even if he wasn't, there's an air of like 75% of the time it sounds like he was a big old dick.
Well, and when you watch the seasons of Community, right, and Pierce starts off as just kind of a buffoonish old man, and then they turn him into the villain of the show, and you realize that's because Dan Harmon is like, let's write to the fact that Chevy sucks. He hates us, we hate him. Let's just write to that. And I think the shame of that is, I actually think when they lean into that, he is actually quite good at that. I have heard that his feelings were kind of hurt at sometimes about having them turn Pierce into such an unrepentant, like racist and sexist, but he was actually pretty good on it. That's one thing I'll say is, I know what you mean about him being like one of the weak links of the show. I don't know if I fully agree, but I get where you're coming from. But I don't think he ever was like slept on the job with Community. He's still a professional enough, I suppose, to have done the work. But yeah, so I certainly like a lot of early Chevy Chase stuff, though. I mean, as you said, we're about to rank this franchise, but I'm also a huge Three Amigos fan. I love Spies Like Us. Of course, Caddyshack. So yeah, I mean, I like everybody. I think I just have a complicated relationship with Chevy Chase. I would call myself a fan to a certain degree, but I don't think he's someone I would want to meet or ever have any kind of like conversation with. It's probably best to leave that alone.
And with that, let's talk about briefly individually the first four of the franchise. I had told Trev that I didn't know if I had time in the last couple of weeks to revisit a couple of these, but I did make time. I had not seen the first Vacation or European Vacation in probably maybe 20 years. So the first time I had seen them, I think I was maybe 10 years old at the time, maybe even younger, actually. And I realized by watching the original Vacation from 1983 that I don't think I've ever seen the unedited for TV version. So I saw Beverly D'Angelo's bosoms for the first time. So that was a surprise. And,
which I believe make a return appearance in European Vacation.
They do, not as prominent,
yes,
but they are there. First of all, I got can we just say like also the budgets and how much these movies made? I was actually a little bit surprised by this. The first movie's budget was $15 million. $15 million in 1983 seems like a lot for a comedy. Am I crazy?
It is, but I mean, they were you did have some comedic powerhouses attached, right? So this entire franchise starts from an idea from John Hughes. He writes the first three, and in fact, the first one, the reason this is a National Lampoon's movie, the first one, is because this is based on a short story he wrote about a family vacation he went on when he was a boy. and that story was published in National Lampoon's magazine, and that's what was then adapted into this as a film. Now, from what I understand, the other two names I was going to mention here, Harold Ramis, who directs it, and Chevy Chase, who stars in it, kind of heavily rewrite his screenplay because his story was initially from the boy's point of view, and they obviously wanted to put it more from the dad's point of view. But still, he goes on to also work on European Vacation and Christmas Vacation. So you have John Hughes, you have Harold Ramis, and you have Chevy Chase. I'm not surprised they were willing to pony up a little bit of money for this.
Yeah. Well, it paid off because it made $61.3 million worldwide. And again, back in 1983 numbers, that was huge. Yeah. So rewatching it, I was absolutely in love with it. Like it is kind of a perfect comedy in my opinion. I'm attracted to every single one of its sensibilities. It was super funny. Lots of visual gags, which I love. Chevy Chase was on fire.
You know, I haven't had much of a chance to talk to you man to man, Russ.
Well, I've only been a man a few days, Dad.
Yeah. You're growing up so damn fast. I spent the last 15 years of my life developing newer and better food additives. I guess I've missed an awful lot. First, I didn't want to take this vacation. But now I'm glad I did. It's given me a chance to spend a lot more time with you and,
Audrey.
Audrey.
And I really liked Audrey and Russ in this one. Like the original two were great. Even if Evil dies tonight.
Evil dies tonight!
Evil dies tonight.
Your thoughts on the original one?
Yeah, no, same. I mean, I probably also watched the edited version on TV a lot, but I also saw the unedited version because it was just on basic cable and premium cable all the time when I was a kid. So it's just one of those movies where I told you I don't have to rewatch it. You know, I could have. I thought about rewatching them all for this episode as well, but I have these first three so burned into my brain because they were just on all the time as a kid. And I agree with you that it might have been one of the first comedies I was aware of or loved as a kid that's very episodic in nature. You know, it's pretty plot light. It's let's get into a station wagon and drive to Wally World, and then it's just a sequence of what else can we think of now. And even in this one film, there's different kinds of humor. Sometimes it's a sex comedy. Sometimes it's very slapsticky. Sometimes it's a little bit more verbal-based humor. It kind of covers the gamut, and it is doing it all very well. And you just have, I mean, look, Harold Ramis he's just one of our best comedic directors of all time. He just has such a deft touch for this. And you said it's Chevy Chase at the top of his game. I think the whole family is doing well. One of the best one sequence supporting characters of all time, which I'm sure we're going to get into more in a moment, because that character comes back, of course. But yeah, no, I love the first one for sure. It's great.
And then we move on to European Vacation, though. In 1985, made for $17 million budget, and what did it make here? $49.3 million. So it didn't make quite as much. I thought this was quite a step down. This one I revisited, and this one I've always felt was quite a step down, in my opinion. I think most of the fandom does as well. Like you said, Harold Ramis is not a part of this movie, and I think that is sorely missed. His charming way that he directs comedy is gone. This one becomes very screwball-y in a weird way.
Yeah, I like this one. I think it definitely has its moments, right? There's definitely some sequences I really remember. You know, the German Oktoberfest dance where they're slapping each other is a sequence I always remember.
Yes.
I think Eric Idle's character that they keep injuring is very, very funny.
I hate to bother you, but we're from the United States. We're staying at the Royal Imperial Windsor Arms.
Royal Imperial Windsor? Ah, very nice hotel.
Well, yeah, we like it. It's a little small.
Yeah. Well, you go back the way you came, and you just keep going to...
Oh, my God.
I think you've got a bad cut there. We better get you to the hospital.
It's just a flesh wound, honestly.
Are you sure?
Nothing to write home about.
Okay.
No need to bother, matron.
Did you say left or right up there?
Just a left, yeah.
Oh, maybe it's broken.
Oh, no. It's just a leg, honestly. I've got another one. Yeah, no, I'll just pop into the chemist. Be right as rain in the morning.
Yeah. Of course, it's just exciting to see a Monty Python alum in there as well. The thing I always remember, to this day, I often think whenever I go through a roundabout, even if they're just a little roundabout, I always think of the moment where they get stuck in the roundabout, and it's just
That's
hey, look, everybody, Big Ben, and it just goes on and on and on. But I always remember thinking the whole kidnapping plot is so stupid and like out of place. And it's like this is not a franchise that needs that kind of conflict at the end. So the idea of having to save the mom from a kidnapper was just always like, really? Why are we going there? It felt like one step too high. We should say though this one is also, even though it doesn't have the Harold Ramis touch, which I agree is disappointing, it is directed by another kind of strong comedic director, Amy Heckerling, who does go on to who has directed Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Clueless. So I mean, she knows what she's doing too. I just think the script is a little less focused this time.
It also starts the trend in this franchise to recast Audrey and Russ every single movie, and these ones are by far my least favorite. Russ and Audrey, they're so bad. They're so insufferable. They're the least
memorable for sure. But I will say I love that it starts that trend, because that trend is one of the funniest things of the franchise.
Yes, 100%. And then moving on to 1989, Christmas Vacation, $25 million budget, made 71.3, and has become a staple in the holiday movie pantheon. I did not have to rewatch this movie because I think I watch it 1 to 2 times every year with my family. It's just on in the background throughout the day. So weirdly, I think Christmas Vacation, I think I've seen this movie perhaps 40 times. It's just I can recite this movie,
What are you looking at?
Oh, the silent majesty of a winter's morn, the clean, cool chill of the holiday air, and an asshole in his bathrobe emptying a chemical toilet into my sewer.
Shitter was full!
Yeah. You checked our shitters, honey?
Clark, please.
Yeah, no, I have a distinct memory of seeing this one in the theater as a kid. I'm pretty sure this was the first one I went to in the theater. But then, yeah, like you said, it instantly became like a perennial. Like, we got to watch this every December, if not more than once. And just like you have revisited it many, many times. And it's funny because we talked about the box office of this franchise, but we didn't even talk about the fact that how profitable this franchise must just be off of merchandising, because still to this day around Christmas time going to various stores and there's so much Christmas Vacation merchandise, whether it's the actual like the reindeer mug I've seen being sold, so many t-shirts with like this different sayings and scenes on it. I would say for many people, as you said, it's in like those, it's one of my top 10 Christmas movies, just even apart from being part of a larger franchise.
And then we actually take quite a break. We take an 8-year break and drop the National Lampoon's moniker. They don't have anything to do with this, with Vegas Vacation in 1997. This one was a $25 million budget, same as Christmas. And this is where the diminishing returns are there. It makes $36.4 million. So this one was quite the bomb, actually. I have seen this one many times as well, just from years of watching TBS Superstation. I think this was the vacation movie that was on maybe every weekend throughout my entire childhood. So I've seen this many, many, many times. I really like Russ in this movie. What's his name? Ethan Embry? Is that his name?
Ethan Embry. You mean Nick Papagiorgio?
Nick Papagiorgio. This is a really funny plot line. And I put $1 in, I got a car. I put $1 in, I got a car. I put $1 in, I got a car. Like this one has a special place for me. I understand it's a little weaker, for sure, but I do. I like this one. I know that's not a lot of people's favorite of the franchise, but I think it's because I've seen it so many times,
Chris, I'm with you on this one.
Beautiful.
I think this is like, I know it is the kind of considered the black sheep of the original franchise, but I wonder how much of that was just, how much time had passed, and I guess the comedy world had moved on from this franchise a little bit. This was an attempt to see, like, can we still do this, But I think this is one that people sleep on a little bit, or just, it definitely... It's definitely more hated than it should be, I think.
Yes.
This one has some very, very funny sequences in it. Cousin Eddie, played by Randy Quaid, who was the character I was alluding to earlier, who was like one scene in Vacation, brought back in a larger way in Christmas Vacation, again shows up here. Very, very funny stuff with him. Very funny. The Nick Papagiorgio stuff with Russ is great. Let's just say it, the hottest Audrey, who was, of course,
absolutely.
Marisol Nichols, who was, oddly enough, that's one of the moments where I started to definitely feel old, was when I realized that Audrey in Vegas Vacation was Veronica's mom on Riverdale. I was like, oh no.
Oh my God, I just realized that.
Yeah. But no, this one's got some really good stuff in it. I think it goes a lot sillier sometimes. It's a lot more broad in its humor, and I think that's definitely a reaction to being a 90s comedy and trying to kind of keep up with that. But no, I think this one is fun. I still quite enjoy this one.
So let's just quickly rank them, I guess. Like, I don't want to include it. We'll place Vacation 2015 in the ranking when we discuss the film. But like right away, I'm just gonna say, for me, Christmas, then Original Vacation, then Vegas Vacation, then European Vacation.
We have the exact same rankings, Chris.
Perfect.
That's what I would do as well.
Awesome.
I did notice that neither of us apparently have seen National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation 2, the 2003 TV film focused on Cousin Eddie. Are you aware of this?
I am aware of this. I just learned it this week doing the research, and I will not be watching that.
I've watched a couple sequences on YouTube, and you are making the right call, I think.
Again, it's one of those things we talk about. You're supporting characters becoming a leading man. It just doesn't work. Stop doing it, Hollywood. Don't
Especially
do it.
that character, because the comedy of that character comes from Clark Griswold reacting to him. You know, and like the oddness of that character being contrasted to other more normal characters. Not that any Griswold is necessarily normal, but you can't put him front and center.
100%. I have to say, I'm very happy that we landed on the exact same ranking. I was a little worried about Vegas with you, but that's great. A little bit of a defender here for that.
I always again, I'm going to Vegas very soon on my own vacation, and I whenever I think about Vegas, I kind of return to that joke with the casino that's just games like which hand behind my back, am I holding card in, or pick a number,
Yeah.
Eddie, this place is great. They don't have any of these games at the Mirage. Pick a number? I'm great at that. Coin toss. Eddie, these are my games. Give me $20.
Dealer has rock. Pay paper.
Call it.
Clark, what say we go back home and bury what's left of my money?
Heads.
I'm sorry, sir, it's tails.
Almost.
So going into the 2015 Vacation. So again, one of these movies hadn't been made since 1997. And all of a sudden, in February of 2010, New Line Cinemas announced that they're going to start developing a brand new reboot, sequel thing. Funnily enough, they're owned by Warner Brothers. Now, Trev, 2010, what happened a year prior to 2010? What huge, mega, giant, R-rated comedy came out and made $500 million?
Yes, this would be The Hangover.
Yes. So The Hangover is a surprise, gigantic hit. I almost said ginormous. That's my mom's word. A $35 million budget, goes on to make $500,000. And then actually, I was reading here, I completely forgot that the whole series, all three movies, from 2009 to 2013, had made $1.4 billion.
Yeah,
which is insane.
Which is like doubly surprising when you factor in you never meet anybody that likes Hangover 2 or 3.
No.
Like, people went and saw them, apparently, but nobody likes them,
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, the first, like, what are your thoughts on the first one? Like, briefly, I really like it, but you go.
I remember really liking it. To be honest, I've only seen it the one time in the theater, and I loved it. I thought it was very, very funny. It's one that I'm, like, afraid to revisit now, because I also went and saw part 2 in the theater, and that was, like, so bad that it really like soured me on the whole thing, and I don't think I even bothered with 3 as a whole. I know I've seen parts of it, but I never like sat down and watched the entire thing, and that makes me like nervous to revisit it. I also just think like I've had bad experiences revisiting a lot of other like comedies from that era that haven't quite lived up to my memories. So it's kind of like, well, since I liked it that one time, maybe I'll just like leave it alone. But it's not that I necessarily have anything against that first one. It's just more like I don't know, maybe I've moved on from it.
I'll never forget walking out of 2 with me and all my friends, so excited to go see it, and then walking out of it and looking at each other and just saying, that was so mean and gross. And we were just like, I don't know if our characters deserved all that. Like, I just felt it was very, very mean-spirited. And I there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but Hangover Part 2 just felt like just a fucking stain. It was like I watched a 2-hour stain. You know what I mean?
Well, that's kind of the Todd Phillips mode, right? Like, that's where you start to kind of get a sense of, like, oh, that's what this guy's about. Like,
I guess you're right. Yeah.
So, from the astronomical success of the Hangover series, who do they announce to play Rusty Griswold? None other than Ed Helms
of The Office, where they're trying so goddamn desperately to become a mega movie star.
Yeah, let's talk about Ed Helms for a moment, because he's
Yes.
our new leading man here, right?
Yeah.
So a decision is made. So we, like, obviously, as you just alluded to, when they decided to reboot this franchise, this decision makes sense, I suppose. They say, well, let's make it about a grown-up Rusty now, and we'll have Rusty become the new, like, leader of the family, and we can create a whole new family unit here, but continuing the story of the Griswolds. And instead of picking one of the previous Rusties, which I'll talk about that when we get into the review, some other ideas I might have had.
Yeah.
As you said, they go for Ed Helms, and Ed Helms has this very, very interesting career, because I heard the sigh in your voice, and I know why that sigh exists. But yeah, it's strange because there was certainly a time I liked Ed Helms. I would say that's, for the most part, that's especially when he was a Daily Show correspondent, of course. From
Right.
2002 to 2009, he was part of that, like, real golden era of the Daily Show to me. The Steve Carell, Stephen Colbert, of course Jon Stewart is the host, and Ed Helms. That group of Rob Corddry. Just that group of, like, really strong, Samantha Bee, the golden period for sure. And he was, like, he was really good on that. And then he jumped over to The Office, and he was fine even for a while on The Office. When he was kind of in very small doses. I certainly didn't hate Andy at first.
Keywords.
Yeah.
At first.
Well, once the show was transferred over kind of to putting him in the boss role, and he kind of became more of the main character, it was really the beginning of the death knell for that show. But even beyond that, I was looking at his filmography, and you're seeing how in the wake of, like, The Daily Show, and in particular him joining The Office, he does start appearing in a lot of movies. But I was kind of taken with the fact that it does seem that Vacation, honestly, other than Cedar Rapids, which was this kind of, like, small little movie that he also executive produced, and I remember it kind of barely made it out into theaters. It kind of just, like, eked out into theaters and had, like, a very, very kind of, like, very little attention paid to it. But beyond that, he's never really a leading man. He's almost always, like, a side character and everything. Vacation really was, like, the attempt to see, will this work? And as you said, it's interesting that it made money, so we'll have to, again, talk about it in our review. Why don't we get even more? After this, there's no more kind of Ed Helms above the title movies. He goes back to being, like, he's like the one of the four leads in something like Tag. It's never like he's the main guy. But there, I mean, obviously because he was part of the trio of The Hangover, there were definitely, you saw, like, in the wake of that, how much Galifianakis was pushed, to the forefront too.
Right.
And so of course they wanted to try it with Helms as well. Bradley Cooper was lucky in that he had kind of more of a varied persona already, to where he didn't have to just be, like, the Hangover guy. He could also do dramatic stuff. He was already, I think, gearing up to be a director. He didn't have to rely on that. And then Galifianakis was so silly and so bizarre that you could put him into, like, much more varied stuff. I think Hollywood was just not really figuring out what is the whole Ed Helms thing,
Totally.
And maybe a character as, like, milquetoast as Rusty was, like, the best bet, I suppose. He's just a goofus dad. Maybe that's the right character for this guy.
Should we discuss if he is the right character for this guy and start talking about the movie?
Yeah, I think we've beat around the bush enough. Let's just jump into our thoughts on the 2015 Vacation.
Wally World, here we come.
What the hell is that?
That's a 2015 Tartan Prancer. It's the Honda of Albania. Let's hit the road.
What kind of asshole would drive his family cross country?
Audrey, Dad wanted us to be close, and that's all I want for my family.
Family is the most important thing there is.
Hi, folks. You must be the Fung family. Huh? I'm just messing you. Look at his face. It's like, Fungs? Huh?
Stop talking to me.
Sheila, do you like school this year?
That's okay. So, do you like school this year? That's seriously what you sound like. Just shut up.
You gotta go faster, Dad. The Prancer doesn't go any faster.
Okay, well, maybe if I press this rapid button, it'll, like, give it a boost or something.
Yes.
What is happening?
Why am I swiveling?
I don't know.
They see me rolling.
It looked like somebody blew their head off. Freeze!
This trip's been a nightmare.
You had a dream to take your family to Wally World. Never let that go.
What kind of a family are you? We're the Griswolds, you piece of ass.
Wow, this is beautiful.
I say we call it Griswold Springs.
Why does it smell like rotten eggs?
That's the sulfur, buddy. It's natural.
We should jar this stuff.
I don't think this is a hot spring.
Found a dart.
Are you crazy?
Everybody out of Griswold Springs!
We're naked and covered in human waste.
Oh, come on, sweetheart. We don't know that it's human.
Rusty Griswold takes his own family on a road trip to Wally World in order to spice things up with his wife and reconnect with his sons.
That's it. All right.
Yep. Yeah. Usually I add a little bit more. I put plot details here and there, but really I don't know. Trev, was it necessary? Was that good enough for you?
Not only is that the plot that you found online, but I bet you that's just what like the writers said when they walked into the room to pitch it. Just like, look, we're gonna do Vacation again, and this time it's Rusty. There's that famous story about James Cameron pitching Aliens. Have you heard the story where he just walked into where the executives were? And he wrote the word alien on a board, then he put the S, and then he made the S into a $sign, and that was it. And I'm guessing that for this, they just, wrote like the Vacation up, and then they crossed out Clark Griswold and wrote in Rusty, and that was it. Like they're like, they'll go on a road trip again. They'll go to Wally World, because this movie very much is, in a certain sense, it is a legacy sequel, but it is kind of doing a remake of the first one. Mm-hmm. So Chris, do you want to go first and share your thoughts of the 2015 Vacation that we've talked about, how we felt about the others?
So I'm going to lead with a quote from, usually we like to quote Ebert, but I'm actually going to quote Richard Roper right now. Mm-hmm. And I think he has a great line here which encapsulates a lot of my feelings, which I will expand upon. But here he is from the Chicago Sun-Times. It's a vile, odious disaster populated with unlikable, dopey characters bumbling through mean-spirited set pieces that rely heavily on slapstick fight scenes, scatological sight gags, and serial vomiting. I can't really disagree with that. I think this movie has some amusing bits, some funny jokes, some little gags here and there. But as a vacation movie that takes place in this universe, it just does not work. Mm-hmm. It is so outside of the realm of reality that it ceases to be funny. There's no real heart to it like there was in the other franchise. We talked about the simplicity of the plot. Sure, it's simple, in that one line, but there's too many layers to this movie. There's too many and by layers I mean we're going on vacation to fix a marriage, fix a sibling bond, reconnect with the family, hit all this nostalgia boner shit, be a new franchise. And there's too many things to deal with because this is just a raunchy sex comedy. Mm-hmm. So when you want me to care about these characters and really get the emotional beats to hit, you can't have all this really gross stuff in it. Again, that's not necessarily bad. I have no problem with a raunch fest. I love those movies. One of my favorite comedies, I love Eurotrip to make kind of a through line. I think Eurotrip is awesome and does it really, really well where this one fails. And I just find Russ is so unlikable. And everyone around the movie is wacky. They're too wacky. There's no straight man. There's no straight characters. Everybody's super wacky. Real comedy comes from real characters, okay? And let's go back to The Office for a second, because Ed Helms starred in that. The Office was a great show for a few seasons. And then all of a sudden, everybody ceased being characters, and they became caricatures. They became wild and zany and weird and completely outside the reality. So it wasn't funny anymore. Like the original Vacations, hijinks ensued on the vacations. Mm-hmm. And as somebody who's gone on many family vacations, and I'm sure you did as well, problems arise. And there is genuine comedy to be had in normal everyday situations, but this one is just so fucking wacky. And I think, maybe I'm just going too hard on it right now, but it's like, what do you think? I don't know. Maybe just cut me off. You go.
I was really struggling with how to define this movie as I watched it, because I know what you're saying, and like, First of all, I should say I'm completely with you. I do not think this works as like a vacation film. I did not find this very funny. As you said, there are actually a few amusing moments here and there, and we'll talk about them. I mean, it's not a complete. It's not like it never makes you laugh or smile, but overall, there's something about it's not working, and it's not that it's mean spirited, but I think it is. You hit on a couple things. The heart is certainly missing. I don't believe this is a family who even likes each other.
Exactly.
Like they seem like they're all at each other's throats from the moment the movie starts. And I think that's a big problem and a misunderstanding of what made the first vacation film work, because that was a movie about a family that loses it as the vacation goes on because things keep going wrong. Mm-hmm. And this one just starts us at a place of they're all bizarre. They all like can't seem to like stand each other. And it's you're not seeing like them go more nuts. You're just watching insane characters from the get-go, and that's a problem. So the heart isn't there. And when you in the the third act, spoilers, sorry, when you start to pull the stuff with like Russ finally realizing that he needs to kind of save his marriage, it all just feels so by the numbers, and you don't buy it. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, the raunch factor, like yes, there was nudity and there was some kind of adult jokes in the first couple of vacation movies, but we are not even 5 minutes into this film before there's a joke that involves Ed Helms falling face first into a little boy's crotch.
Yeah.
And I was like, uh-oh. And then after that, Chris, I wrote down a list of things that are the focus of jokes in this film, all right? Pedophilia, glory holes, sex predators, rim jobs, child rapists, and dicks hanging out of underwear.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, what? Why? Like, why did this movie feel the need to go like that hard? And first of all, that stuff by 2015, it's not funny anymore, right? This is like still the byproduct of like that post-American Pie, like return to real raunchy R-rated comedies, like the Saving Silvermans and the Tomcats of the world. Mm-hmm. But by 2015, we were already over it. We don't care. We realized that that's not enough for. And this movie seems to still think, if we just have characters talk about rim jobs, that'll be funny. Mm-hmm. if the youngest son is psychotic and is always talking about how he wants to murder his older brother, that'll be funny.
Mom, do you think Uncle Stone will let me ride his horse?
I don't see why not.
Do you think I can shoot his guns?
No, you cannot.
Too bad. I would have shot you right off that fucking horse.
But again, it just makes you like kind of hate everybody. As you said, like every situation, every character they get into is just like, it doesn't seem real. It's like super cartoonish. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it just is, it's really missing the mark. And it really seems to be beyond just being kind of a bad comedy on its own terms. I think it really is like a disservice to what this franchise was. It just doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like the right story for the Griswold clan, as highfalutin as that might sound.
well, okay. In the original movie, the first couple scenes, Clark is going to pick up his brand new car, right? Mm-hmm. And he's excited for the car, and he brings his son, and it turns out his car's not there, so they have to give him a junk car. Like a car that's it's just ugly. Like that's the joke, is that he's going in to kind of buy a brand new maybe sports car or something, or just a nice automobile, and he gets just this really weird looking ugly car, right? Mm. In this movie, Russ just goes to buy a shitty car. And just the next day, he has it on the driveway. But Trev, it's not even just a shitty car. It's like this car out of a Looney Tune cartoon. Like, it makes no plausible sense whatsoever. It's got 500 buttons. It's got a Nazi a swastika on it as one of the buttons that they keep returning to. Like, we're never going to press that button. And like, the functions of the car make no sense. It explodes with a button. It turns his chair around 360 degrees for no reason. It has two gas tanks for no reason. It runs out of gas really quick, but then there's like a charger, and the charger drags. There's like 500 different things that are wrong with this car that no human being would ever buy on the planet. And it just makes no sense. Because, again, they're trying to do what the first one did, but they lack the fundamental plot of the first one, was that Clark was going to buy a good car, and then circumstance made him stuck with this vehicle. In this movie, Russ Griswold is this fucking dumb that he buys this car that might kill his family?
Yeah. Dude, I couldn't agree more. Like, I wanted to ask you something, and you just hit on, so I know you're going to agree, but did it feel to you like Ed Helms wasn't even playing Rusty in this? And I know that's a strange thing to say because, as you said, we've had 4 different versions of Rusty up to this point. And they're all slightly different. That's always been the joke, right? In some of the vacation movies, Rusty seems like he's the older brother to Audrey, and in some she seems older. Like, they made that into an ongoing thing. But Rusty never seemed like he was an idiot. That's the thing. Like, he was never played this cartoonish. It's almost like they said, well, we're just turning Rusty into Clark, so why is that? Like, we'll just do that again. But even Clark wasn't this stupid. Like, Rusty is like is a buffoon in this to comedic or to a cartoonish level, as I should say, and it doesn't feel like it fits what we've seen before. I don't know. I was watching this and I had this thought. This is what I alluded to earlier. If I was going to make this movie, wouldn't it have been kind of funny if instead of doing the whole Ed Helms thing, they just actually got back the other 4 Rusty actors and had it switch like every 20 minutes who was Rusty, like, and have nobody react to it. Like, just to keep everything else the same, but just you start with Anthony Michael Hall. Evil dies tonight. Then suddenly it's I can't remember the guy from the second one, but then suddenly it is like Johnny Galecki, and then it is Ethan Embry. Like, that would have been very, very funny, But apart from that, like, at least give us a Rusty who, for all his foibles, for all his problems, and for how dumb he could be at times, Clark Griswold had heart to him, and he really seemed like he cared about his family, and he was always trying to do the right thing by his family. His whole motivation in Christmas Vacation is he really wants to get that pool for his family. He cares about his family, and this movie's giving that lip service, but Ed Helms is just playing it so broad and so stupid and so clueless that it never, you can't connect to this character. There's no reason to ever get on his side.
I wrote here in my notes, there's something wholesome about Chevy Chase and his view on family. Yeah. Ed Helms lacks the dumb, raw, masculinity and confidence of Clark, that he just kind of becomes a dweeby doofus who whines the entire time and screams. That's all he does. Ed Helms, it's not even just Ed Helms, but in this movie, I feel like just because you get loud and scream, it doesn't mean you're funny. Clark was genuinely funny. A lot of his jokes, or a lot of the things that made him the most funny, was when he was just silent and bumbling around, or when he'd talk in a very kind of confident way about something he didn't know. That's what made him funny. You're so right. It just doesn't feel like... It doesn't feel like the Griswolds. That's what it is. Even when we meet up with Audrey later on, played by Leslie Mann, who I love, Leslie Mann doesn't feel like any of the Audreys we've seen before either. She's dating this extremely, Republican Chris Hemsworth, and she's very... There's kind of a running joke about how they're so traditional that he doesn't let her work. Yeah. And she's like, well, maybe I'll get a part-time job. And Chris Hemsworth like, no, baby, that'll never happen. Never, ever, ever gonna happen. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, Audrey didn't never have a sense of self. I mean,
because we're even told later that is we're told that they're actually stuck in a loveless marriage and they just won't admit it. And it's like, that's where the movie does get a little mean-spirited. And you're like, oh, well, that sucks. What's the joke here? And now I just feel bad for Audrey. Why is the movie saying first of all, we're going to put Audrey in one sequence of this film, but also her life is terrible. Ha ha ha! Oh, thanks.
And then even when we inevitably get to Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo's cameo, they're in the movie for about 3 minutes. Even their life is weird too. They're running a bed and breakfast, but they seem awful. Why? They were never awful people. They were very sweet. But they seem mean. I don't know.
Should we talk about that now, just to get it out of the way, since you brought it up? Let's bring it up, because we can come back around to everything else. But so of course you knew, because this is a legacy sequel, there was no way they were going to do this without having Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo pop up. So you're just kind of waiting for that cameo. And Chris, I wrote that in my notes, so I'm happy to say that, because I wrote here, Chevy is not playing Clark Griswold. Chevy is playing Chevy. It's definitely they are feeding off of what they know the world thinks of Chevy Chase now.
Yes.
And kind of the more comedic persona he developed after Vacation, but also just his own persona. They're playing him as this, really, as you said, they're playing him clueless to the point of being inconsiderate to others.
Yes.
And that's not, as you just said, that's not what Clark ever was. Like you said, they're acting like complete assholes to the guests at their bed and breakfast. First of all, also not to be weird about this, but I don't know, Clark Griswold and he never felt like someone who'd go on to run a bed and breakfast. It's just like such a weird way. Like it's like they wanted to figure out how can we get them in, but not have them still living in Illinois, because by this point they need to be like further along in the road trip. Why would they be living in San Francisco? Oh, they run a bed and breakfast now.
Right.
All right, but yeah, they're just, and Beverly D'Angelo is given like nothing to do in that little cameo sequence, which she had a pretty like thankless role in the originals in general, but here it's just like she's only there to like because they need both of them. I noticed in the opening credits, and I'm sure you did too, that Chevy Chase got the with Chevy Chase like credit, but her name was just kind of like in the regular credits, and it's like, oh, that's kind of disrespectful. I get that he's the bigger star, but you at least could have put with Beverly D'Angelo and Chevy Chase, But yeah, I don't know, that sequence sucks. Like because you said they've actually, what's interesting about Chevy and Beverly D'Angelo is they've gone on to play the Griswolds in like a lot of commercials. I don't know if you know about this. Like in 2010, they even did like this like short film, this vacation short film that was for like Getaway.com. And then just like I think last year they did like a Christmas vacation thing, and they've popped up in like different ad campaigns. And even most of those they are better than what they are in this, because this just, it feels off. It does not feel like the same characters.
It doesn't, and they reach the point of absurdity. Like Clark almost yells at his guests as they walk in the door, and he basically tells them to beat it. And then he opens up a door on some guy going to the washroom and sprays like Lysol in his face and stands there like an asshole. It just doesn't work because, and the weird part about that scene is that there is a glimpse of Clark. There's a glimpse of Clark that we knew before. And when he talks to Russ, and Russ is complaining about how the trip has gone so terrible and this and that, and Clark goes something like, the journey sucks, okay? But that's what you got to do to be a family. Mm-hmm. And I liked that line because, again, it comes back to Clark still doing everything for his family no matter what. And I think that maybe that should have been the movie. The movie should have been Russ reconnecting with his family, specifically his dad. And in this scene, for that emotional beat to work, he needs to realize that it takes work, it takes patience, it takes you doing everything for your family, even if it is difficult, and that Clark never stopped trying. And that's what I feel like this movie should have been. If you're going to do a Lego sequel, make it about Rusty going in his, flashing back, thinking about all the times on these vacations and being like, oh, when I was on vacation with my dad, they were just the worst. They were the worst. They were the worst. And then he grows to understand by reconnecting with his dad that they weren't actually that bad. And no matter what, Clark did it for his family,
I'll push that even further. Like I'll say, if you want me to rewrite this briefly, I will say what I think you could do at the end here. And I feel like if you want to really win people over this movie, I don't think you relegate Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo to just this cameo, first of all. Like, maybe that was them trying to avoid having to work with him at this point after, like, years of stories about how he'd become more difficult and everything. But I'm sorry, it's a vacation movie. We want to see Clark Griswold more than we want to see Rusty Griswold. So I kind of like your idea of how the movie should be more about, like, Rusty reconnecting with his dad. But then why not push that even further? And we just said there's a sequence where they're all having dinner together. And Clark tells them that he's aware that Audrey is actually stuck in this like loveless marriage, and that her and her husband are always cheating on each other, and they just don't admit it. What if they kind of, at that point, they give up the mission to go to Wally World, and instead it becomes about Rusty and Clark, Beverly D'Angelo, Christine Applegate, who we mentioned here, she's playing Rusty's mom, the whole family going
Rusty's
back.
Rusty's wife,
yeah. Going back to like save Audrey, because I don't believe for a second that the version of Clark Griswold I saw in the previous movies would just sit there and be fine with his daughter being stuck in a marriage like that and like not do anything about it. I feel like he would go and he would actually stand up to Chris Hemsworth's character in maybe like a dumb way and maybe a buffoonish way, but I think he would fight for his daughter. And like that would be like a more emotional and more fitting third act for me, where it's all about like the Griswolds finally like kind of reconnecting, and you end it with all three of the characters, or all four of the characters we've enjoyed before, back together as a family unit.
Yeah, and it's weird because look at us, we're two idiots, and we just rewrote the ending of this movie, or even just didn't rewrite it, but like we fix some emotional beats. Now, Also in our rewrite, we have to just eliminate a lot of the grossness. Were any of the jokes in the old movies gross? Oh, other than actually, well, the shitter was full is just funny. That's different. That's more of it. But that applies to Eddie, right? That applies to Cousin Eddie, so it works.
Like the original movies, even when they do something that seems like it could be mean spirited on its face, they play it in a more farcical way that doesn't feel like the Eric Idle thing. There's that moment where Eric Idle gets hurt and the blood is spraying out, but they play it so absurd that it does feel like Monty Python. And you're like, oh, okay, I get this. This is funny. And this one does have just a lot of they're trying to be uncomfortable. They're trying to go for that ooh kind of humor. And I mean, when your comedic heights are, haha, they think they're in hot springs, but they're in raw sewage and they're rubbing shit all over their face, and then he finds an actual human ear floating in the water. It's oh, what? Come on, what is this?
That scene was so gross. I know I keep saying that word, but it was I was really squirming, really squirming. It was absolutely disgusting. And then there's another scene where they're in a motel, and again, Rusty's trying to reconnect, especially sexually, with his wife, played by Christina Applegate, and they decide to go take a shower together. And then they open up the shower, and there's somebody had committed suicide in the bathtub, and there's blood on the wall, and there's just fucking there's mushrooms inside that have grown on the bottom of the tub.
He picks up a clump of pubic hair, thinking it's a sponge.
Is that funny, Trev, or is that just fucking gross?
Yeah, it's not funny. It's the lowest common denominator of comedy, And there's a way, because you brought up the Austin Powers movies earlier. Mm-hmm. There's a way to do that kind of humor and make it funny by understanding how ridiculous it is and pushing it to a certain level. But this movie just doesn't have that wit to it. It doesn't know what to do with that idea. It doesn't know how to make those scenarios funny, because it's just thinks if we show you something gross, it's funny because you don't expect to see it, and then it stops there.
This is where I want to jump a couple years into the future with John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. I love Game Night, and I don't think you've seen that yet.
I haven't. No, I've heard nothing but good things though. So.
Game Night is top tier studio-driven comedy. It is probably my favorite studio-driven comedy in the last 10 years. I just recently showed it to my parents, and there's some quote-unquote mean-spirited stuff in there, but they make it work. They make it work. It's visually interesting. The mystery's great. It's very fun. It's a wild movie. But again, it's not Vacation : Game Night, right? So Game Night works. But you have sold me on a vacation movie here. And when you have this level of psychotic behavior, it just doesn't work within the realms of the brand that you've forced me to buy my ticket to. And I think that's what's so frustrating is I see something I love Horrible Bosses 1. Horrible Bosses 2 actually I think is near the first one in my opinion. But this feels just so... It's in the wrong direction at all points. You know what I mean? It's on the wrong trajectory all the time.
It's also failing miserably at being a legacy sequel. And I want to expound on that, because not only are D'Angelo and Chase not really playing Clark and Ellen, right? So we've already covered that. But let's just talk about this in service of being a vacation, kind of reboot, but also remake.
Guys, come on. My trip to Wally World when I was a kid was the best time I ever had.
So you just want to redo your vacation from 30 years ago? Don't you think that's going to be kind of a letdown?
No. We're not redoing anything. This will be completely different. For one thing, the original vacation had a boy and a girl. This one has 2 boys. And I'm sure that there will be lots of other differences.
I've never even heard of the original vacation.
Doesn't matter. The new vacation will stand on its own. Okay?
Why not just have Rusty and his family go on a different kind of vacation? Why do the Wally World thing again? Because let's place this into the reality of this universe. Rusty makes this point about how he says that family vacation was the best trip of my life, and I want to redo that. And then you remember that vacation ended with his father taking a security guard hostage at Wally World.
Yeah,
and that's never brought up. And you'd think if you're going to push the Wally World thing just for the nostalgia of it, which is clearly what they're doing. Well, then have that be a joke in the movie. Why not have a moment where he's telling the family about that, and then he's like, oh, and then my dad took the security guard hostage, and they're like, wait, what? And he's like, no, never mind. They don't even do that as a joke. Mm-hmm. Once they get to Clark and Ellen, and they say we're going to Wally World, Clark doesn't say anything about the fact that happened. there's no reason Clark, by that point there, the car you talked about, the Albanian Trancer, I think it was called, that has all the problems, is blown up. So they need a new vehicle, and Clark reveals that he still has the station wagon from the original.
What?
And he like gives it to them for the last part of the journey. Like, wait, what? We never saw any others. Why would he have it? That was just like, that was a crap car that they all hated. So it's like, and like, yeah, it's, stop trying to just redo the same thing, especially when it doesn't make sense. You know, none of these things like line up the right way. So I just didn't understand. And like the Wally World thing, it ends up being pointless anyways, because it's just for like, I guess it's for a joke about how long the lines are at roller coasters now. Like that's the only like kind of payoff to that. And then of course like a family fight where the two families fight. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like it's not working even on that like that legacy element. Like it's bring the stuff up if you want to act like you're a true sequel.
Exactly. And the imagery like that did bother me. Again, showing the old car, I was scratching my head being like, wait a second.
Yeah.
I've seen 4 vacation movies, and that car was in 1. And why does he still have it? And then like,
but if he doesn't still have it, then we can't show them driving off while Lindsey Buckingham's Holiday Road plays for the like 19th time in the movie, because that's the song from the original movie. You know. Again,
going back to the mean-spirited nature of it all. Russ is driving down the road, right, with his family, and then he sees a hot girl in a sports car, in a Ferrari, and I was like, oh, okay, of course, this is reminding you of the first one, fair enough. That woman gets killed in a car crash.
Yes. That's the joke, folks.
That's the joke. She gets horribly killed.
Well, Chris, let's not forget the earlier allusion to that original scene from the first movie, right? Is that there's an earlier scene too where the older brother is in the backseat of the car, and he's looking out, and there's a cute like teenage girl in a Jeep that's driving next to them, and him and her start kind of having a connection. And that's when I was watching, it's like, oh, okay, this is they're redoing that thing from the first movie where you see someone in that car in the lane next to you, and this scene ends with his little brother putting a plastic bag over his face and trying to suffocate him. Because the little brother in this is presented as psychotic.
Guys, I have exciting news.
James has AIDS?
What? No. That's horrible.
I'd be excited.
What is this? Like, what is going on? Like, so I said earlier that the movie's not mean-spirited. I take it back. Like, this movie has this like weird mean-spirited like streak to it that is just so out of place. And as you said, it's like gross and uncomfortable, and it's not. Obviously, it's not endearing, but it's just putting you at like odds with this whole family, and you just can't get behind them.
I like to we haven't talked about her at all, but Christina Applegate, I'm quite a big fan of hers.
I love Chris Applegate.
And she has got great comedic timing. She's in some classics, like Anchorman is just a fucking masterpiece. She's awesome, and I do like seeing female comedians get to be gross. You know what I mean? Like it's like there's a sense of like fearlessness when it comes to the actress. I've recently become a huge fan of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and Caitlin Olsen is a fearless comedian. She is somebody that will go to the lengths of the earth to be crazy and goofy and stuff that you don't see women do, just to get the joke. And weirdly enough, Caitlin Olsen has a cameo in this, which we will get to in just a bit here. But I think there's a scene with the Debbie Do Anything Chug Run, where Debbie Griswold, played by Christina Applegate, they kind of veer off to go visit her old sorority. And it turns out when she was in the sorority, she was a wild, wild woman. And she does this chug run to impress the new girls that are like making fun of her and thinking that she's too old, and she's like, oh, I'll do the chug run, I invented this shit. And she drinks and she throws up and she just bumbles around. In any other movie that does work. In a vacation movie, not so much, but I do like seeing somebody like Christina Applegate, who's very attractive, very good at what she does, but she's like, you know what, I'm still going to vomit everywhere. I'm going to bumble around. I'm going to look silly. I do like when that happens. And then, like I said, Caitlin Olsen, I think, is a master at doing that.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I love Applegate. I think I felt bad for watching this because I think, as often is the case with female comedians or just women movies in general, she's given the rather thankless role of just being the wife. You know, it's like they're trying to give her just a little bit more than Beverly D'Angelo was ever allowed to do in the other films, but still not much. I think she has a couple great moments. I do like when Rusty says, we're going to go visit your mom's college. And he's like, maybe you'll even want to go there, talking to the kids. And the one son is like, no, I think I'd rather go to actual Ivy League school. And she just under her breath is like, I don't know, fuck you, you little asshole. That's a funny moment. The Debbie Do Anything is I get the idea of the joke, and it is fun seeing her do that. So I wish she had more stuff to do in this, honestly. Because going into it thinking that, oh, okay, well, it's Ed Helms and Kristen Applegate, I kind of thought it was going to be a little bit more of a two-hander. And it's really not, unfortunately. Other than the Debbie Do Anything sequence, she's not really allowed to be the funny one too much otherwise than that. Which is a shame. You mentioned the Caitlin Olsen cameo. We should talk about how this movie is just kind of, as often the case of comedies of this era, just stacked with tons of recognizable faces in small parts. Because even that sequence, the sequence that she shows up in, is a joke about how Rusty and Debbie go to sleep, go to have sex on the border of the 4 states, right, where Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. They want to go have sex there. And it turns out when I get there, the joke is tons of couples are doing that.
Yeah.
And that just allows them to have a montage of tits and everything, And then these 4 cops show up, and the joke is that each cop is from a different state, and so they're kind of arguing over their jurisdiction. And that scene should have been very exciting, because I love all 4 of those performers, right? The 4 cops are Caitlin Olsen, Michael Pena, Nick Kroll, and Tim Heidecker. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be great, and it's really not. Yeah. I do think if there is Keegan Michael Key and Regina Hall show up earlier at a dinner party that the Griswolds throw as a couple who's kind of it's that thing where you're you have a couple that you're friends with, but also there's a rivalry about who's the better family. And Keegan Michael Key and Regina Hall are obviously also both super, super funny, but not necessarily given much to do in this.
Yeah.
If there's one performer who kind of, I think, gets an actually decent funny... Well, I think there's 2. We're going to talk about the big one, obviously. But Charlie Day, also from It's Always Sunny. That sequence is pretty funny. When they get to the Grand Canyon and they decide to go river rafting, and he's their guide. And at first you think you get the joke. The joke is that he keeps making these bad puns. Yeah. And that was kind of enough, That actually kind of reminded me of Phil Hartman in Vegas Vacation as the Hoover Dam tour guide. So it's oh, they're kind of doing that. But when they pushed it that little bit further to where right before he takes them on the trip, his fiance calls and dumps him, and so now he's suicidal as they're river rafting, that's one of the funnier sequences in the movie. I did like that, and Charlie Day is pretty great in that scene.
I don't understand, though. What are you even saying? Just like that? I love you? You love me? Tanya, please, just let's think about this for a second, honey. You're all that I have in this world. Tanya, no, please. No, Tanya, no! Please don't hate. No! God damn it! Who's ready to go on the river?
Are you okay, Chad?
Oh, yeah. Turns out I'm not engaged anymore, so all aboard.
Oh yeah, and it just while they're on the rapids, it goes totally silent, and it's just a completely just a musical montage of him trying to kill himself with the family on board. Yeah. It is unbelievable. That is the funniest scene in the movie. I was laughing quite hard, but again, huge Charlie Day fan. Yeah. He's excellent. He's excellent. It's so good.
The other cameo I want to mention before we get to the other one, which certainly I want to talk about, is, and I'm only bringing this up to, again, talk about, when people haven't seen this movie, they're not quite getting at what we're saying about, the level of comedy and the grossness and the mean-spiritedness of this. Norman Reedus shows up briefly as a trucker, and the ultimate joke of this trucker is that he is apparently a child rapist. That's the joke. Pretty funny stuff. Now, when this movie came out, and I did not see it because I heard tons of bad things about it, and I just wasn't really interested in general. The one thing I did keep hearing about it from everybody was oh, it's terrible. However, kind of the scene stealer in this, and at the time it was kind of surprising, was people were kind of genuinely shocked by the comedic talents of Chris Hemsworth. As Stone Crandall, who's the weather anchorman and super Republican husband of Audrey. I had that in my mind about remembering that everyone like loved Hemsworth in this, so I was like waiting for that scene because it kind of sounded like, and it's clear what the movie's trying to do is they want him to be the new Cousin Eddie, right? Because it comes along about that same point in the movie, and it's that same idea like, well, let's stop over this other part of our family. So he's meant to be like the new kind of scene stealer that if they had done sequels, I'm sure we would have got Stone Crandall like in a much bigger role.
Definitely.
I'm sure that was like the assumption. He is funny in this. I was thinking, I bet. Because this is like a pre-Thor Ragnarok, world. So it's like people didn't realize he was funny yet. I'm coming to this as someone who now is already aware that Hemsworth is funny. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have like the shock of the new to me. So it didn't quite work on that level where it's like, yeah, I mean, I already know Chris Hemsworth has the comedic timing. So I wasn't like too like taken with that character. But I mean, he does, he gets a couple funny moments, and I'm not like I never think it's that funny when there's just jokes about like, oh, look at the outline of his dick in his pants,
Right.
But just some of his like more subtle things, like I do love the bit with him where he keeps making analogies about faucets for no reason.
That was great.
Same old Rusty. You buy water from a faucet. Shoot, you boys are growing faster than the weed under a faucet. You could make hot water come out of the cold faucet. Even the strongest faucet sometimes lets out a few drops. What is with these faucets?
Like that really reminded me of the Michael Keaton in The Other Guys, kind of like always quoting TLC. Like that's kind of like that run kind of thought reminded me of. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I come away from this going like, oh man, Stone Crandall's going to be the new Cousin Eddie, but he is pretty good in this.
No, he's good. He's good. And unfortunately, like all comedy trailers, basically his biggest moments are in the Red Band trailer, which is so if you don't want to sit through the movie to see Chris Hemsworth, just go watch the Red Band trailer and you'll see all of his stuff. And even again, that scene, he takes Russ out to go herd the cattle, and for no reason at all, Russ flies into a bull and explodes it. Mm-hmm. And that's the joke.
Yep. As he's just covered in intestines and guts. Yep.
Yeah. Again, yeah. It is mean spirited. It's very, very mean spirited. And it's something that I don't have a problem with, but I think it's just because this is in this franchise. That's why I have a problem with it. It just doesn't. It doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit.
I think that's almost letting it off too easy though, because I think it's not just a problem that it's like the wrong franchise, but it's also just that it's not even doing that well.
Right.
Like, I'm with you that there's nothing wrong with mean-spirited comedy. Like, look, you're talking to someone who thinks Freddy Got Fingered is kind of like a misunderstood masterpiece to a certain degree. But I just don't think this movie is, like, clever at it either. Like, like I said, it's just like, haha, if he picks up pubic hair, that's funny. If she rubs shit on her face, that's funny. Like, they don't seem to understand, like, why this stuff is funny or how to push it to the level of it being so gross it's funny. It's just gross. It's just stupid. This is like a lazy comedy ultimately. A lot of it, like we said, there are good sequences. Where I wouldn't say you're not going to laugh at all, but it's unfortunately it never hits like frequently enough to really win you over. Mm-hmm. And when they are trying to turn things like a woman being just pancaked in a semi-trailer accident into a joke, then you do wonder like what their intentions were with this movie.
Mm-hmm. And that's got to be the reason why this didn't really hit. Critically especially, and why they decided to just shelve it entirely. The franchise is done theatrically, and then sounds like as of 2019, The Griswolds, a comedy-based sitcom, was being developed for HBO Max by none other than Rusty Griswold himself, Johnny Galecki, from Christmas Vacation. He played Russ in Christmas Vacation. His production company was developing this, and it sounds, I haven't heard anything since in the 3 years, but I guess a pandemic did hit, so who knows. Right here, The Griswolds brings the iconic family home from vacation and explores their daily lives in the suburbs of modern Chicago. Does that entice you at all?
It does not, and let me remind the people behind this movie. So when you say the Griswolds are the iconic family, Clark Griswold is iconic.
Yes.
Right? I don't even think, and as I said, this is nothing against Beverly D'Angelo. It's more about how the part was written. I do think Ellen Griswold is one of the ultimate like MILFs of the movies I grew up on, that's for sure. But I wouldn't say she's necessarily an iconic character. I think Rusty and Audrey are iconic for the joke of them always being played by different actors. That's like what's iconic about those two. So like it's really just Clark. So I don't know. I think you might be misunderstanding audiences' relationships to this franchise if it's not going to be about Clark and you're not bringing back Chevy Chase, which I can't imagine would be the case. Like maybe he'll show up for cameos, but I doubt it's about like, you know, I doubt he's the regular like figure in that show. So we'll see if it goes anywhere. But no, I wouldn't say I'm excited about the idea of a Griswold show.
Yeah, and especially just at home. Like I don't really care about that. The funny part about the Griswolds is them getting into fish out of water antics.
Well, the funniest one is them at home, but it's also the rest of the family coming and like being
exactly
like, a nightmare for them. Yeah.
It would be great though, kind of alluding to the way you would rewrite this movie, is if every episode it was played by different actors. That would be good.
See, that's what I would actually. That's what I would do. If you brought that to me and said, "What should we do?" I'd say, "Okay, let's get all let's get tons of like comedic stars, and let's have somebody different play Rusty in every episode, and like even like to push it like sometimes like have it to be like like have it be, I don't know, to go back to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, have it be Glenn Howerton in one episode.
Yeah.
And then the next episode is Hannibal Buress. With like no explanation. Like just push that. Why not?
Yeah. So suffice to say, Trev, we did not enjoy Vacation 2015.
No, in fact I would say I quite actively disliked it. It really kind of bugged me as I watched it. And that's putting it lightly actually. I just felt like like the ugliness of it, the lack of heart, the laziness of the humor, it all just like left a really sour taste in my mouth, especially coming off of a franchise where even the one that people say is the bad one, Vegas Vacation, I actually find to be quite funny.
Yeah.
So for me, this is like, this sucks. And like you just said, like it made tons of money, but like why didn't it get any sequels? I think that was the general reaction to it. And like, you know, you look at the reviews, I think a lot of people went and saw this maybe out of curiosity. And I think everyone kind of walked away from it being like, yeah, that didn't feel like Vacation, and I don't need to see more of that.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. So really, there was a success with our May the Farce Be With You, eh?
Yeah.
You had a great time in May.
Oh, yeah, it was great. Two of my all-time favorite comedies, Mordecai and Vacation.
Now, gun to your head, which one are you rewatching again?
Vacation, actually.
Interesting. I would pick Mordecai.
At least with Vacation, I know if I sit there long enough, I'll get to that Charlie Day sequence.
Okay, well, that's fair. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
And I like Holiday Road. You know, it's like they play it too much in this, but, you know, it's a good song.
So yeah, that'll do it for Vacation 2015. Now, Trev, we just said we wrapped up May the Farce Be With You. And we love our theme months. We cannot say that enough. And actually, Trev, this is the first time in our Failure to Franchise podcast that we have now developed a franchise of our own within the franchise of the podcast. We are sequelizing a special event that we did last year, and that is Summer Surprise Part 2. Yes. Last year we randomized a bunch of films that we have on our list, and just unbeknownst to us, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen this summer, but we are going to randomize again in this podcast in real time of what the next 4 films will be that we will be covering.
Because if people wonder, like if you head to my Letterboxd, which there are links to our Letterboxd accounts in our episode descriptions, I have a list that we keep of the potential films for Failure to Franchise, and typically we choose off that list based on the events we're kind of thinking of or the themes we're thinking of. But we have so many movies on there that don't really fit in anything, or that you and I always feel like you can tell we don't really want to pick because we just don't want to watch them.
Yeah.
So it's fun every summer now to just say like, well, let's just throw them in this randomizer. Let the fates decide what we'll be watching next. So yeah, this is we're actually, both of us are about to find out for the first time live on the air what our next 4 movies are.
All right, so I have them all here. I'm going to click the random choice button, and we will see. So June 7th, we will be looking at... Oh, no. Men in Black International.
Oh, speaking of Hemsworth.
Yeah, that's funny. That's interesting. I love my Matrix. It worked out.
Right.
June 7th.
First time watch for me. I never bothered.
Unfortunately, second time watch for me. Okay. June 21st, we will be looking at Son of the Pink Panther.
Okay.
Which is funny because we just did Mordecai and we talked about Pink Panther.
What's
Interesting.
going on here?
What's happening? Oh my god. The Matrix works in mysterious ways. Okay.
Son of the Pink Panther, of course, not with Peter Sellers, but the attempt to reboot the franchise with Roberto Benigni, everyone's favorite.
Oh, wow. Well, okay. July 5th, we are looking at Darkest Minds.
Okay.
What is Darkest Minds?
I believe it's like another one of these YA movies that we always dread kind of looking at.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a while since we've had one of those, so I guess we were due. We were
Yeah.
due. And then to wrap up Summer Surprise Part 2, July 19th, we are looking at... What is this? V.I. Warchowski?
V.I. Warchowski, starring Kathleen Turner. It's like a female, like private eye detective based on like a long-running book series.
Oh my god!
So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, I don't know if I can call this a success.
Quite.
Last year was a lot better. I'll say that. Last year was a lot better. Wow. Okay. Mark it. So, follow along with us at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2, FPod on Twitter, Insta, all of it, all of the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Also, rate, review, whatever you do. Throw us a star rating, whatever you deem us worthy. And just join the tribe and hit that subscribe and keep on with us along Summer Surprise Part 2, starting in 2 weeks from today.
Mm-hmm. And after that, and we don't want to say too much about it yet, but we do have a very, very exciting, quite lengthy event following that. So that I'm looking forward to. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, this was all right.
This was fine. It's interesting that it kind of May the Farce be with you is just because of this. Now we're just rolling into June the Farce be with you, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Well,